So, okay, I'll just leave you for Onder. It's already setting up. So, give a round of applause for Onder.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We are going to talk about progressive web apps, and we will try to answer this simple question: is it a replacement for your mobile app? My name is Onder Ceylan. I know it's a confusing name for Dutch people, but trust me, it means leader chief in my language. I work for LINKIT as JavaScript squad lead, and for the past 2.5 years, I helped KLM on its digital transformation at engineering and maintenance department. And on my free time, I enjoy acting as a community leader at organizations like ITNEXT, GDGNL as co-organizer and speaker. I'd like to start my talk with a recap of the mobile platform we have today. Simple question: how many of you doesn't use any smartphones? Please raise your hand. I'm in front of the right audience. That's great. So the number of smartphone users is over 2.5 billion in 2018. And China, being the most populous country in the world, is leading the smartphone industry. Around half of Chinese population is projected to use smartphones by 2020. And Google's Android and Apple's iOS are the two topmost smartphone operating systems in the industry. Android, with 80% of the share, is leading the market. Digital media usage time is driven by mobile apps, with smartphone apps accounting for half of all time spent on mobile devices. And a majority share of users don't download any apps in a month, and an average user only downloads 2 apps in a month. How many of you downloaded an application last week? I think it's half of the audience. And app discovery is done across several channels, including App Store, word of mouth, advertising. And while numbers going down, it pops up this simple question on my head: is interest in apps waning? Traditional native web development makes people sweat. And it requires a development team per platform. You mostly end up with slow time to market. And existing cross-platform solutions come with a trade-off, including JavaScript to native and hybrid solutions. And app stores are another part of the story. You mostly go through a stressful app review process, and it creates an overhead in releasing app updates. Many app acquisition methods are seeing modest declines over the past year. And most app users across all age segments access 20 or fewer apps in a month. We all use the same applications over and over again. To get your app downloaded on Apple App Store or Google Play Store is very expensive. It starts around $4, and it's even more for marketers. And that's just the start. If you want your users to take an action like a purchase, for instance, you need to pay 10 times of a cost of an install. And for subscription, you need to pay 3 times more of a purchase amount. And I must admit, I'm a web fan. I have been around web since I was a kid, and I think the web is a global treasure, and it has many strengths we all enjoy. It's a distribution platform like no other. It has extensive APIs and standards. JavaScript literally dominates the world. And you can introduce performance boost to your applications with the technologies AMP, PWA, and web packaging. GitHub published the State of the Octoverse report, and according to its report, JavaScript has the most contributors in public and private repositories in the world, including the other communities as well. And according to 100,000 developers who took this survey at Stack Overflow, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, which are web technologies, web languages, are the top 3 languages most used in the world. And today, there are exciting web APIs such as WebVR, WebGL, WebRTC, WebAssembly, and service workers. For instance, Autodesk recently transformed its 35-year-old AutoCAD application by compiling its C++ code base to WebAssembly, and it opened a possibility for them to publish this application to web. There are web APIs for accessing the device's hardware, and integration with operating system enables activity out of the browsers, thanks to service workers. And when you compare mobile platform with web platform, it's all about acquisition versus time spent. The average user spends 16 times more time on a mobile app than they spend on a mobile website. But mobile web tends to capture larger audiences, as you can see. What if I tell you there's a way to get the best of two worlds? It's progressive web apps. Progressive web app could be introduced as a new type of building native app, but it's not limited to mobile. You can also build progressive web apps for your desktops or any type of device you're using. I found this logo when I was looking for progressive web app logo variations on the internet. And after seeing this poster, I decided to set this theme for my talk. I think it's perfect. So there are so many logos that you can see. I think they still need to work on the branding itself, but it's a relatively new term, an umbrella term, which depends on not so new technologies. In simple sentence, it's just a website that took all the right vitamins. And these vitamins are Fetch API, Cache API, History API, Web App Manifest File, Service Workers API, Push API, Notifications API, WebRTC, and so on and so forth. When launched from user's home screen, Service Workers enable progressive web app to load instantly, regardless of the network state. A service worker written in JavaScript is like a client-side proxy, and it puts you in control of the cache and how to respond on resource requests. By eliminating the dependence on the network, you let your users to have instant and reliable experience. It responds quickly to user interactions with silky smooth animations and no janky scrolling. 53% of users will abandon a website if it loads under 3 seconds. If it loads in more than 3 seconds. And once it's loaded, users expect them to be fast and interactive. Modern web apps can be developed in a way that it can provide a super cool experience for a fully capable browser and an acceptable experience for less capable ones. This is being done for years with best practices known as progressive enhancement. It feels like a natural app on the device with an immersive user experience. Progressive web apps are installable, and when it's launched, it can provide a full screen experience for users and can even re-engage with web push notifications. The eventual aim is that web apps should have better representation on search engines to let them better catalog them, rank them, and expose them by adding super capabilities. And one of the most powerful features of the web is to be able to link to an app at a specific URL. So no app installs, no app store needed. I would like to go through some of the case studies that I found important, starting with Uber's. Uber built its core app with two PWA, and it only takes 50K gzipped, and it takes less than 3 seconds to load. Twitter Lite saw 65% increase in pages per session and 75% in tweets, and it loads under 3 seconds. It was so successful that Twitter recently replaced its primary website with the progressive web app version. And Tinder cut load times from around 12 seconds to about 4 seconds with their new progressive web app. It is 90% smaller than its native Android app. And there are more on e-commerce. Flipkart's progressive web app is driving half of its new customer acquisition. Nearly 60% of visitors to the progressive web app had previously uninstalled the native app primarily to save space. And Alibaba increased conversions on the mobile web by 76%, with 14% more monthly active users on iOS and 30% on Android. And there are many more. You can visit pwastats.com to see case studies like this about progressive web apps. And according to Gartner, it predicts that by 2020, half of the general-purpose consumer-facing applications will be progressive web apps. And Forrester's reports state that the future of the web is progressive web apps. and the world will spend around $1 trillion by 2021 for reinventing the web to make it mobile first. I found this chart especially interesting. It's a study from Mobify. Customers typically see a 20% revenue boost when they introduce progressive web app to their businesses. So it means if you're running $1 million business and you wait for another 6 months to introduce a progressive web app to your business, it will cost you millions. What I'm saying is that time to build progressive web app is now, and don't worry, I'm going to tell you how to do that. You can start developing a progressive web app by simply creating a JSON file. This JSON file is called web app manifest file. Web app manifest file is providing metadata for your application to give it natural look and feel and to have it act like a native application on the operating system. You can use Chrome Web Inspector's Web App Manifest section to inspect your Web App Manifest file implementation. Using the application shell architecture is one way to build progressive web app and instantly load on users' screens, similar to what you see in native mobile apps. So the idea is that you cache or pre-cache the key resources, static resources of your application, such as JavaScript files, icons, CSS files, and you provide the layout, the shell of your application instantly. So this demonstrates the difference between first visit and repeated visit when application shell is in the picture. So it can reduce the amount of time for the metrics of your first time to interactive and first time to paint to tremendous amounts. Service workers. A service worker is like John Cena on steroids. It runs on a separate thread on browser, and it lets you to do things on the background. It's the key API for progressive web app to supercharge your application with so many other progressive web app features. A service worker goes through 3 lifecycle stages. It starts with registration, and then continues with installation, and then it's activated. And after it's activated, it's attached to your client app, and they can live happily ever after. And releasing an update for your progressive web app is as simple as changing your service worker file. Your browser will detect the byte differences of your service worker, and it will try to replace your service worker if it's not being used currently. When you restart your application, the new service worker will take over, and it will start doing its job. Once you build your service worker, you can go to Service Workers tab of your Web Inspector on Chrome, and you can see the details like when it is activated, what's the status of it. You can go to offline mode to test your application, and you can unregister it, update it if you like. You can even debug it. Using service workers can be a big change to your architecture. To make it simpler, Google introduced the library called Workbox, which wraps up many common powerful service worker patterns into an easy-to-use API. It's also possible to extend your own service worker instead of using automatically generated one. It introduces patterns like pre-caching, request routing, runtime caching, background sync, caching strategies, and offline analytics. And if you're looking for all-in-one built-in solution, you should check out PWA toolkit from Ionic. It also includes Workbox underneath, and on top of that, it has Ionic framework to provide a native-like UI experience on any browser, and it introduces web manifest, routing, push notifications, service workers, and lazy loading. And once you build your progressive web app, you might want to assess the skills of your progressive web app by using an automated tool. Google built this open source tool called Lighthouse, which lets you to run a couple of audits against your progressive web app. It is even possible to use it as part of continuous integration to catch regressions on your performance metrics. Progressive web app audits are based on the baseline PWA checklist, which lists 15 requirements. 13 of them can be automated and is part of this audit. Eventually, it displays you a report which will show the passing audits, and there's a weight for each audit which eventually grade your progressive web app from 0 to 100. And integration with app stores are on the way. Add to home screen on Android does more than just adding it to your home screen. It creates a wrapper shell APK file which will let your progressive web app to act like a native mobile application. And Microsoft Store publishes, even scrapes progressive web apps automatically through their Bing search engine. If your progressive web app met the requirements of Microsoft, it will automatically scrape your progressive web app and submit it in their store. And due to conflict of interest, Apple keeping iOS Safari behind the curve. Safari on mobile devices is becoming new Internet Explorer, if you ask me. And we all know what happened to Internet Explorer, right? So I expect Apple to invest more on progressive web app, but due to conflict of interest, it's not very likely, in my opinion. There is a nice repository which is called PWA Police. It displays the problems that you can face while developing a progressive web app, especially on Safari, because most problems you face are related to Safari. For instance, push notifications are not working on iOS devices yet, and they recently introduced service workers with iOS 11. If you're curious about what web can do today for you, you should visit this website on your mobile device or on your computer to see your browser's capabilities and various web APIs that you can take a look. It also displays a demo and an implementation path for you to discover. Top 3 browsers are working on implementation and standardization roadmap for web platform features. These features expose so many APIs that you can use to access devices' hardware, for instance, or do things on the background. And you can just go to these websites and see the implementation path of each of these APIs. For instance, Web App Manifest is taken into development for WebKit, which is the engine for Safari. And you can also see which APIs are supported in preview, it's ready to deploy soon, and in development. With Chromium, Google invests a lot on progressive web app. They recently started, not recently started, but they recently named their project to Project Fugu, which you can find on this URL, including a lot of APIs to fill the gap between progressive web apps and the native apps. These APIs include contact speaker API, proximity sensor, or call answering, call control. And if you like to discover some of the nice featured progressive web app, there is an app which is kind of a clone of an app store, but due to nature of progressive web app, you don't need an app store. You can just navigate to this URL, browse the categories, and pick one app that you're interested in, and just click on it to launch it. It's that simple to access to a progressive web app. Progressive web apps should be part of a broader strategy. So if you like to provide a consistent, high-quality experience across all devices, including mobile browser, a native mobile app, a desktop browser, or native desktop app, you should prefer progressive web app. I think words and slides are not enough to describe what progressive web apps would offer. You should feel it yourself. That's why I built a prototype app for you to experiment today. It's a cross-platform app for ITNEXT Summit we are having today. And it runs on various platforms, including iOS, Windows, and Android. You can enjoy using this app throughout the day to keep track of your favorite sessions and engage with speakers to use it as a scheduler. If you can navigate to this URL now, you can immediately start experimenting with it. And please allow the notifications and add it to your home screen. Once you installed it, it will take around 150K on your device. And it's as simple as typing the URL on your browser, adding it to your home screen. And then it will create a new APK package on Android, for instance. This is a new application on the device. And you can start running the application. And with the notifications itself, if you add a session to your favorites, for instance, when your favorite sessions are about to start, it will send you reminders, notifications through service workers 5 minutes before the session. And you can also see the progress of the active session. You can use this application as a scheduler, like your watch, throughout the day. It demonstrates the core principles of progressive web apps, like being accessible through search results and links, being installable, and being engaging. And while doing that, it uses various APIs. For instance, this is a payment request API. You can give this a shot through the sidebar menu. It allows, based on your operating system, it allows you to charge your users for your e-commerce. Please don't pay. I will not come back with the refunds. I don't think it will work. And you can navigate to session and speaker details to engage with the speakers. For instance, to demonstrate the deep linking between apps, you can just go to a detail of a speaker and click the mention link, and you can immediately engage with the speaker throughout the conference. And updating your app is as simple as this. When there is a byte difference on a service worker, application will pop up this prompt, which will ask user to immediately refresh the application or not. If user not prefer to immediately refresh it, it will be automatically refreshed once you restart the application. This application is scored 100 as a progressive web app, and I open sourced this with this URL, u.nu/PWA-OSS. So you can see how I converted an typical Ionic application to progressive web app by adding these additional features. Thank you, and please follow me on Twitter for updates on progressive web apps. I like to share tips and tricks around this topic. Thanks.
So, to follow up, who has questions for Onder? No, I do one here.
But maybe somebody else, I can.
No, you can do it.
Okay, so well, thank you for your useful and informative presentation. And so, in general, PWA is kind of website which has an access to operation system. We can define it like that, and it seems in a way that it will make developers' life easier. That's for sure. And it seems that's our future. So everybody will push and vote for this. But I'm also thinking about the future of users. And there's a question about vulnerability. Since this website has a full access to the operation system, a lot of issues will be raised. And they're saying that they're gonna ask user about every action if he wants this action to be performed on his operation system. And in this way, I see the future like what we have now with usual websites, where we have a lot of annoying pop-ups asking, do you agree with cookies, do you agree with that and those? And plus these pop-ups about every action on my operation system. So it seems the future of users are pretty just around all these pop-ups with the agree button. So did you investigate this question, and what do you think about it?
There are a lot of precautions about security when it comes to web. Your application is mostly sandbox with its own domain. So the actions that you can take is quite limited, actually. And about the actions which are hidden behind a pop-up button or a prompt, there are audit tools like Lighthouse, which gives you your application a grade when it does things like that. For instance, my application now prompts the permission for notifications, which is not a good pattern, actually. you should ask permissions for features like notifications when it's really needed. And it also warns me about this action. So what I expect in the future is browsers will automatically detect these frauds or these actions, and it will mark and grade the progressive web app that they have been cataloging.
So you're saying that this is actually the responsibility of browser, which is kind of platform which runs the application. So browser should detect all dangerous actions taken by application.
Yes.
So we have to trust browsers in a way.
Yes.
We're going to run PWAs. Okay.
Anybody wants to ask more questions?
Intro, you can have it. Cool.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
I had a question about companies that are at the verge of investing in new technology, maybe like PWA, and are also looking at, with interest at AMP, accelerated web pages.
Yes.
What could you say about companies who are entering that area?
What I have seen so far, the companies investing on AMP are the companies who has the most acquisition through search engines. For instance, media sites or news sites like BBC are using AMP heavily. AMP lets your browser to cache your assets, pre-cache your assets, even before you click on a link. This provides really instant experience when you combine it with progressive web features. And I specifically find this useful not only in news sites, but for the sites which has a lot of indexes on search engines. Because this is a feature which is provided by a search engine, by Google mainly.
Yeah, it increases your rank in Google, maybe
I
other
believe so,
websites,
yes.
Bing. So that's why it's also interesting also for e-commerce companies, not only news companies. So yeah, they're maybe eager to look at it. But is there like a touching point between AMP and PWA?
You can convert your application by simply changing your HTML tags to be AMP compliant. So you can actually build an AMP application and progressive web app together. So there is no overlap actually between each other. And about the grade itself, I know Google is grading mobile-first applications. And if you're implementing features like AMP and progressive web app, I think you will get the top search results.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Anybody? Oh, he is too close to you. Can you throw to me so I throw to him?
I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I was building, converting existing web application to a progressive web app, and then I met a situation with iOS. It is not enabled the camera. We struggled a lot to enable it in iOS, and then we stopped the idea of, or enabled it only for the Android apps. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas about when the Apple may support this in iPhone? Also, for this link you provided for progressive web app, it's not working smoothly in the iOS. What do you think?
What I think about iOS implementation path, that they really took a big step by implementing service workers. Service worker is the key API which opens door of possibilities for your progressive web app, and they have already implemented it. So from what I see so far, they started investing on progressive web features, but they're behind the curve, as I told. So there are also, since it's newly implemented in the platform, a couple of issues that is reported on that repository, which is called PWA Police. And I think it might also cover the trouble you were facing. So if you can check that repository, you can even see if there's a workaround, possible workaround around this issue or not. Or you can report bugs to platform status, like I was showing the stages on WebKit feature status. you can see the implementation path of any type of API you're depending on. And if you have requests, please submit them. Just create a bug or feature request on the browser itself, and they can take it more seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have no more time for questions, but I would like to say again, thank you to Onder for being here.
Thank you.
And before we go to the break, I just want to ask you one thing, because we're going to split up afterwards. The room underneath us, exactly underneath us, is going to have the other track. You have the two agendas on your chairs or on the website, or the PWA that Onder did. But who is going to be hosting that track as well? I want to invite to stage Dimitris. Come on up. Dimitris Tafilarakis. So yeah, I can pronounce the name in Greek. Now you can step down, Dimitris. That's good. And before we go to the break, I just want to take 1 minute of your time so you can look around you. Because it's something that I always like to mention on this type of conferences, that if you look around you, you can probably see and count how many women, black, Muslim, and peoples are here, and that the number is never good. So why I say this is that when you are at your work environments, if you witness any microaggression, anything that you think it should not be there, please stand up. The majority of us are white, privileged, male people working in our environment, and we need to do whatever it takes to make this a more inclusive environment. So take that into account when you go to our workplaces. And let's have our breaks.